Good morning and welcome to our Sunday presentation. This lodge meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic. Today's presentation will be on the great founders of the Theosophical movement. And next week's topic will be the Christmas cycle. We also meet every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the Key to Theosophy by H.P. Blavatsky. United Lodge of Theosophists is guided by its declaration, which states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification in practice of those principles, through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists and the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading will be from the Dhammapada. The section is titled The Enlightened Ones. By what track can you allure one who is enlightened? Trackless indeed is he. His victory naught can undo. None of this world can touch that victory. He is a seer of limitless range. By what track can you allure one who is enlightened? Trackless indeed is he. No net of desire can catch him. No craving can entangle him. He is a seer of limitless range. Even the devas, shining gods, aspire to emulate the enlightened wise, who are great contemplators, who are the peaceful ones, who are steadfast and tranquil. Difficult it is to obtain birth as a human being. Difficult it is to live the life of a man. Difficult it is to get to hear the true law. Difficult it is to attain to enlightenment. Eschew all evil, cultivate and establish thyself in good, cleanse thy mind, so teach the Buddhas. Enduring patience is the highest tapas. Nirvana is the supreme state. So teach the Buddhas. He who oppresses another is no recluse. He who harms another is no ascetic. Revile not, harm not, discipline thyself according to the law. Be moderate in eating, dwell with solitude, be devoted to higher thought. Such is the teaching of the Buddhas. Lusts are never satisfied, not even by a shower of gold. He who knows that enjoyment of passion is short-lived, and also is the womb of pain, is a wise man. Even in celestial pleasures he finds no delight. The disciple of the supremely enlightened delights in the destruction of craving. Men driven by fear seek refuge on mountains, in forests, under sacred trees, or at shrines. Such refuge is not secure. Such refuge is not the best. Such refuge frees not a man from pain. He who takes refuge in the enlightened one, in the law, in the order, perceives clearly the Four Noble Truths: suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the Noble Eightfold Path, treading which all suffering is transcended. That verily is the safe refuge, the best refuge. In that refuge, man is free from all pain. An exalted man is rare to find. Not anywhere is he born. Wherever a wise and noble one is born, that whole household prospers. Blessed is the birth of the Buddha. Blessed is the teaching of the good law. Blessed is concord in the order. Blessed is the austerity of those who live in concord. He who pays homage to those who are worthy of homage, be they the enlightened ones or their disciples, those who have overcome the host of evil and crossed beyond the stream of sorrow, he who pays homage to the fearless and peaceful ones, his merit cannot be measured by any. And now for today's talk.
Good morning and welcome everyone. We'll start today's talk with a definition of the Avatara, and we'll show the connection of it in the secret doctrine to the birth of the human adepts, Mahatmas, and so forth, and how that is linked to the 19th century movement, and that masters, their philosophy, and HPB cannot be separated from one another. Avatars are divine incarnations. Question: who or what is an avatara, a divine incarnation? This question comes to mind when we begin to think of Krishna or of the Buddha. Is there a meaning for us in the conception of an avatara, or is it just a Hindu concept of 10 incarnations of Vishnu, 9 already having passed, and 1 more yet to come? If we turn to the Theosophical glossary, we are told there under incarnations, and this is a quotation, the avatar doctrine constituted the grandest mystery of every old religious system. And under avatara, we read that it is the descent of a god or some exalted being who has progressed beyond the necessity of rebirth. Such a descent means that the god or the exalted being takes birth in the body of a simple mortal. Thus, Krishna is said to be an avatar of Vishnu. The Dalai Lama, HPB says, is regarded as an avatar of Avalokiteshvara, and the Teshu Lama as one of Tsongkhapa, Amitabha. The glossary continues. There are 2 kinds of avatars: those born from woman and the parentless, the Anupadaka. What is the difference between an avatara and one whose ego has taken complete charge of the human entity, one who has become a perfect human being? We are given a good analogy by Robert Crosby in his Friendly Philosopher. A Siddha Purusha, perfect man, is like an archaeologist, he says, who removes the dust and lays open an old well which has been covered up by ages of disuse. The avatara, on the other hand, is like an engineer who sinks a new well in a place where there was no water before. Great men give salvation to those only who have the waters of piety hidden in themselves. But the avatara saves him too, whose heart is devoid of love and dry as a desert. So, we read the Gita all the time, and we are told to apply it to ourselves, Krishna being the higher self, and Arjuna being our lower, and the conversation then takes a personal meaning, which then enlightens each human being according to their capacity as to how we should live the life from that perspective. So Krishna in the Gita calls himself Adi Yajna, the great sacrifice. Adi Yajna, he says, is myself in this body. In this sense, Krishna is a distinct principle in nature. He represents the principle of divine compassion. We can understand more of the meaning of compassion when we remember that compassion is not an attribute, but the law of laws, eternal harmony, and alaya self, alaya being the world soul. What Atma is to us then, divine compassion, the law of laws, is to the great lodge of the masters. Now we will go to the Secret Doctrine. Page 207, 1. It says here, that there will always be initiates and profane till the end of this minor one mantra, which is our present life cycle. The third race was when the sons of passive yoga incarnated in them. In the first or earlier portion of the existence of this third race, while it was in a state of purity, the sons of wisdom produced by Kriya Shakti a progeny called sons of Ad or fire mist, which are the sons of will and yoga. They were a conscious production, as a portion of the race was already animated with the divine spark of a spiritual superior intelligence. It was not a race, this progeny. It was at first a wondrous being called the initiator, and after him a group of semi-divine and semi-human beings set apart in archaic Genesis for certain purposes. They are those in whom are said to have incarnated the highest Dhyanis, Munis and Rishis from previous Manvantaras, to form the nursery for future human adepts. I will read it again. Set apart in archaic Genesis for certain purposes, there are those in whom are said to have incarnated the highest Dhyanis, Munis and Rishis from previous Manvantaras, to form the nursery for future human adepts on this earth and during the present cycle. These sons of will and yoga, born, so to speak, in an immaculate way, remained, it is explained, entirely apart from the rest of mankind. The being just referred to, which has to remain nameless, is the tree from which, in subsequent ages, all the great historically known sages and hierophants, such as the Rishi Kapila, Hermes, Enoch, Orpheus, etc., have branched off. As objective man, he is the mysterious, to the profane, the ever invisible, yet ever present personage about whom legends are rife in the East, especially among the occultists and the students of the sacred science. It is he who changes form, yet remains the same. It is he again who holds a spiritual sway over the initiated adepts throughout the whole world. So then, we do have on earth, as Theosophy teaches, the existence of a fraternity of perfected souls. Fraternity of perfected souls. I guess I'm not supposed to write on this today. Oh, sorry. Fraternity of perfected souls. Who are they? And it is stated that from its ranks have come to mankind its savior teachers, some with a more exalted mission than others, but each fulfilling the requirements of the cycle for which he undertakes that mission. Some as divine kings, others as holy mendicants, all come to impress on the whole or a portion of humanity the same sublime truths which from the ancient wisdom religion. Hence we find that underlying every ancient popular religion is the same wisdom doctrine, one and identical, professed and practiced by the initiates of every country, one body of universal teaching in the custody of one fraternity of cosmopolitan philanthropies. Such is the sublime fact which our modern world has forgotten. So, as Theosophists then, we have a responsibility to humanity for bringing this truth to their notice. The first step towards this emancipation is the restoration of the knowledge of all that there exist no special privileges for any soul, nor are there any chosen peoples, but that divine instructors and living brothers with one aim, one purpose, one teaching, who reach their stature of perfection by self-redeeming work, and who teach all humanity without making distinctions of any kind soever. But passion normally blinds human souls to that fact. Whence this close similarity, so closely indicative of universal tradition in connection with these birth, work, and death of saviors. One of the ways in which the Great Lodge taught infant humanity was to cast in myth or legend from the lives of these sons of light the ancient biographies of the external personalities bearing the names of great souls are the mystic records of their public and parallel therewith of their inner lives in their characters as neophytes and initiates. Hence, the manifest sameness or the means of construction of their individual biographies. Among such myths was one about the great sacrifice of the master soul who renounced his freedom to accept the woes of bodily birth, the self-chosen incarnation of the Lord of Compassion for the sake of orphan humanity. So the central fact of the mystic life, that every human soul sacrifices himself and is crucified on the fourfold cross of matter, is but a variant of the same profound truth. This fact the Lodge impressed on the minds of many peoples by spreading in their midst allegorical stories of heroes who are supposed to have gone through experiences similar to that master soul, and which every human ego should emulate. Such experiences were often purposely woven into the lives of the local rulers, saints, and sages. So the language of the soul, and therefore the soul of all languages, is symbols. That language is universal, and like the incarnating ego in man, it embodies itself in many, many forms. Religions, philosophy, sciences, all branches of knowledge spring from the wisdom religion, which has for its vehicle the ancient universal language. The wisdom religion, or theosophy, is the drama of the unfoldment of the one life, the springing forth of the many lives from the one life, and the orderly procession of the many as the kingdoms of nature till they re-become the one, from the contents of the record of the masters and that is Theosophy. Every stage of that long pilgrimage is described in symbols, and among them that of the adept teacher, whose compassion manifests its practical sacrifice and makes him incarnate in a body of flesh and blood. So there is a long line of these incarnations as religions bear witness to it. So then divine incarnation are actually historical facts. Their own personalities, these beings embody, in their own personalities, these beings embody pure truths. They are wisdom incarnate, the Word made flesh. Purna avatars, full incarnations of wisdom, are beings who embody the totality of knowledge gained and retained in the Mahatmic hierarchy, are a recognized occult phenomenon in Theosophy. They are the pure channels of cyclic will, which finds expression in and through their corporeal existence. Evolutionary impulse manifests itself in sevenfold manner in nature as well as in man. 7 cosmic forces unfold 7 planes. 7 hierarchies of beings beget 7 types of humans. On men-bearing globes of our system, beings who have been men, out of deep compassion and the spirit of sacrifice for their fellows, incarnate to impress the imperishable center in each man's heart with the supreme and sublime fact that he too can, through purity and knowledge, reach this divine status. This happened on earth when animal men became the human being some 18 million years ago. And we read it in the Secret Doctrine. This was the 3rd race. In collectivity but one being, some such compassionate beings constituted the Lodge of Mahatmas to form the nursery for future human adepts on this our earth, and from this tree of wisdom, the ever-living human banyan sprang in due season the branches known as Kapila, Hermes, Enoch, Orpheus, etc. In its constitution then, the lodge is 7-fold. In one of the hidden or obscure Sanskrit documents, we come across the original of the common theosophical expression, the Great Lodge, Maha-Shala. The Great House, translated in central and western India as the Great School. It is not a place, but a collectivity of beings whose self-conscious intelligence transcends human comprehension. In that house are lodged 7 types of men, pure rays of light, each but an issue of the 7 sacred planets called the 7 lords. Rishis by the Brahmanas, Amashashpentas by the Zoroastrians, archangels by the Christians. Of these translucent men it is said that they can no longer err. They appear on earth, but at the origin of every new human race and at the junction or close of the 2 ends of the small and great cycle, and are known as avatars or incarnations. Their stay among mortals is exactly the time required and no more to impress upon the plastic minds of child humanity the eternal verities which they embody in their own being, such impress remaining vivid, though latent in mankind, as innate ideas. Here is the true source of the very common belief in revelation, which is not of books read or hymns heard, but of truth impressed in the heart of man. This is done so as to ensure the eternal truth from being utterly lost or forgotten by the forthcoming generations. As a result of this spiritual mission, some souls, however few in number, make the supreme effort to follow the noble example set by the great sacrifice. In every cycle and race, souls have striven to express in thought, word, and deed that impress made within their own hearts. The successes among such strivers become the adepts and initiates. They continue the example set, incarnate among men to instruct and inspire, and do for their younger brethren what was done for themselves. In the course of a spiritual and intellectual evolution of humanity, these master souls taught in parables and in symbols of primeval truths. Thus arose myths and sacred dramas, which in course of time degenerated into dogmas and religions. At the very dawn of intellectual humanity were laid the foundational stones of all the faiths and creeds, of every fane and church built from first to last, and those allegorical foundations still survive. Universal myths, personifications of powers divine and cosmic, primary and secondary, and historical personages of all the now existing as well as of extinct religions are to be found in the seven chief deities and their correlations. These seven in their spiritual collectivity constitute a supreme unity to which can never be offered profane worship. That supreme unity casts its radiance on earth and is the lodge of Mahatmas. Supreme Mahatma standing for great soul. There's a principle in our complex being dormant in most men. It is the impress referred to above. It is the real awakener of the human mind and soul, first by the study of Theosophy, and then by enacting in our own lives the actions of the great ones. We emancipate ourselves and learn the lesson of renunciation, which is taught in its detail in the voice of the silence, the two paths, liberation and renunciation. Each one of us then is a child of God. Each one of us can develop into a son of righteousness, whose life-giving effulgence kills the terrestrial passions which are the impediments to self-realization. By the help of that hidden principle, we emerge triumphant from the region of lust and iniquity to become karma sakshin, witness of the karma of men, and in all the glory of regeneration we arise as the Graha Raja, king of the constellations, and are at rest as Gapnashman, repossessed of his race. Remember, we talked about the seven rays, seven translucent men in that Maha-Shala. That which is written can be read, that which is spoken can be heard, but there is that in the expression of these mighty masters which can neither be seen nor heard, but which can be known in the hollow of the head and fully realized in the chamber of the heart. Let us all be born again this month as the sun starts on his journey northward on the 21st of December. He is hidden and shrined in each heart of us. And here is an invocation and gratitude. Thou residest in the agglomeration of thy divine personages. Thou begettest us of the unknown, and we greet thee in worshipping each soul which descendeth from thee and liveth in us. Remember, please, that the seven constitutes a supreme unity. This is where our unity comes from, because those seven deities are the ones that give rise to seven groups of human beings on this earth at the beginning or the inception of humanity. And as we develop, we then diverge from that root. And we read about Kapila, Orpheus, Hermes, and so forth, and all these religions worldwide has the root of the same philosophy, which is the wisdom religion. Now when we come to the 19th century, we see that the masters were the ones who brought all this information or knowledge into the world, and HPB recorded it for the future generations to come. So all of it is available if we would only study and learn it, amalgamate it in its pure and disfigured, if that's the right word, not disfigured form, then we open our own channels to move on this path towards perfection or emancipation. That in itself shows that HPB was initiate of the masters, and initiated human being is not an ordinary being as is made to be. Those who understand this philosophy and the concepts that constitute it will never make such a statement. HPB as initiate has sacrificed her life energy for humanity. If we give a meal to a needy person, we think we are sacrificing something, don't we? And if we help a needy person, we think we're doing something in charity-wise. But who amongst us cannot understand the sacrifice of a being of that nature who came and faced the whole world, who was perhaps not prepared to receive such a knowledge, but she stood her ground. She never gave into any human concept. She stood there and delivered that message for us, and his colleague, Mr. Judge, in all of his writings, make it a practical application to our lives. So we can definitely benefit by studying, learning, and the other thing that is required is that we live it. Without living it, it will only be an intellectual course. We will learn a lot, but until we apply it to our own lives and sacrifice to some degree in the footsteps of our predecessors, we will really not know what that philosophy stands for. Now we will open it for questions. Yes?
Now those who say that we need to go beyond HPB and do things other than something that was written over 100 years ago,
And
maybe update it.
so your question is that we should go outside of HPB and do other things?
I mean, yeah, try to read some more updated things than something that's over 100 years old.
We just talked about this great Maha-Shala, this great lodge that had this input into the world in the 19th century. And everything is recorded until the next one who will be announced as coming from that lodge. The Masters Lodge is also divided into 3 groups, HPB writes for us. And the first 2 being the spiritual and continuous is not external. We don't know anything about what they do. But the third one that was for the public in the 19th century was a movement called Theosophy, and HPB brought it into the universe. The whole humanity was under their scope. Now, that writing comes from this lodge, okay? It is not the brainchild of HPB. It was given to us from the Master's Lodge. They are the keepers of these truths, and intermittently, as is seen fit, some of it is released to the world. She said, we're only lifting the cover just a tiny bit. It is very, very small portion of that knowledge kept in that Maha-Shala. When the next will be, who knows? Okay, and to answer your question, we are able to learn something from whatever it is we're reading. There's no doubt about that. But what is its value to your life is how you have to put it. Where would you insert it where this philosophy is concerned? The perverted versions of this philosophy is out there too. But if you do not study the original writings, how would you know what was inserted into it? This student's mind grapples with these issues, but is not able to quite sort it out, in the sense that why wasn't it sufficient to learn and promulgate it or give it as we found it? Why did the students of Theosophy in that era, trying to draw attention to themselves, wrote these books? In other words, taking the attention from the real and putting it on the unreal. What was it that they were doing? Did they know it? Did they do it knowingly? What was it? Ambition, power, position, title they were seeking? This student does not know. Everyone has their own karma, and karma brings, as a reaction or as to what we have done, its opposite will come to us. So that's a different issue, to leave it alone. But if only what HPB brought into our universe was kept under the title of Theosophy, and whatever everybody else wrote named it something different, we would not have this issue today. It is, in a way, cheating humanity of its right, because RC says it is a crime against humanity to change a single word in these books. I go with him, because he also sacrificed his life starting 1909 and reconstituted the original lines laid down to give the 20th century students and now the 21st century students a chance to find this philosophy. Because if we don't have the channel, it cannot be given. This was the channel. Now, if we're going to constitute a different channel to this student's mind, that channel has to come from the Maha-Shala, Mahatmic Lodge. I wanted to read something to you to answer your question a little bit. It says here, this is from Mr. Judge, and if we look over the work of the society, we find wherever the members boldly avow their belief and are not afraid to speak of this high ideal of the masters, the interest in theosophy is awake the work goes on, the people are benefited. To the contrary, where there is doubt, incessant fear of what the world of science or friends will think, there the work is dead. The field is not cultivated, and the town or city receives no benefit from the efforts of those who formally are in a universal brotherhood but are not living out this great ideal. In other words, they're not applying it to their own personal lives. So, as said, we are not saying that we cannot learn something from other writings, but for emancipation or living the soul life, it is reiterated in many, many places that whatever philosophy appeals to the heart, it is much better to stay with that philosophy and not to mix it with others. Whether it is your Bible, whether it is your Quran, whether it is the secret doctrine that appeals to your heart, that's what you need to stay with. Because this is an internal awakening of the soul to its own inner life. It cannot be forcibly put in to any heart. If it doesn't appeal, it will not do any good. And we are told that conversion is not possible, because conversion means that someone is leaving something behind and joining this. This is inherent in these innate ideas are inherent in every human heart. They have been impressed and that they are there. What we need to do is to awaken them to life. And Theosophy provides that possibility of awakening the dormant centers in the heart. It seems like you're the only one asking questions. Okay. We'll answer it.
How do we, I mean, we've read that someone was coming for the 1975 cycle. There are those who claim to be initiates and all around us. How do we know that something is coming from the Master's Lodge as opposed to somewhere else?
Well, we'll read another section. Okay. Adepts are not abnormal creatures, wholly foreign to the human strain. They are men in whom the best and highest of the human heart has been nurtured and matured. They are the prototype and fulfillment of everything real toward which any man may aspire. All men have the same unchanging prototype, for the etheric pattern of heavenly men is the guiding model for every living soul. There is not a man but has within his heart the germs of many noble qualities, which, if pushed even part way along the road to fruition, would astound the most credulous of believers. The Theosophy agrees that the human heart has not yet fully uttered itself, and that we have never attained or even understood the extent of its powers. Why is Mr. Judge referring to the heart again?
That's the organ par excellence, it says.
Yeah. The marks of the adept in reality, it says, are a spiritual knowledge, universal compassion, and unselfish work for mankind. And verily, until these marks are seen and appreciated, we should not recognize an adept if we saw one. Those people who draw attention to themselves and say, I am such and such, are they telling us the truth according to this statement we just read? No. The real ones go about their business quietly. They want to do the work without being hindered. In many, many passages, Mr. Judge cautioned us about believing false prophets and whatnot. So everyone has to make that decision for themselves, but it is important to understand what these beings are and what their natures. is. So sacrifice is the law. So you know that they sacrifice. They are here to sacrifice themselves, if you really look at it that way. And each and every one of them belong to this fraternal house or lodge. And they come to give to the world in portion, in part or in whole, what the humanity can carry at that particular time. What was the effort of the 19th century? There were two forces in the world that it needed to change to some extent. One was dogmatic religion, claiming to be the authority for everything, and the other one was materialistic science. Between the two, HPV says, the truth had no place to lay its head. Those things are not words. They need to be understood in their deeper meaning as to what it is that she's referring to. The human heart is where the innate ideas are. The philosophy brought into the world was at the end of the 5,000 cycle, 100 cycle, and 1,000 cycle. We just read that these beings appear on earth at the junction of a larger and a smaller cycle to imprint or activate the imprint in the heart by giving out some of that philosophy to the world. So this was done in the 19th century. Many places, Mr. R.C. Robert Coresby cautions us, as well as Mr. Judge, not to accept false personalities pretending to be from the lodge that are not from the lodge. And those who attracted attention to themselves are definitely not part of that effort. And everyone today also give themselves the title of successor. Others have avatar. We just read what an avatar is. It is to this student's mind very sacrilegious as well as blasphemous to call those things to themselves as titles, because they didn't earn it. This requires tremendous sacrifice to be able to say that that's what you are. But as we said, no condemnation is directed towards anyone, because karma and reaction takes care of its needs. And the other thing is that we really don't know what they suffered at that time or what they did. So it's best that we just leave them to their own karma. That we be wise, because in this 21st century, each human soul is its own authority. We have the writing. We don't have to believe in anything anybody else says. We can go and dig it up for ourselves. The other value of the books is that HPV went worldwide to do this research. We ourselves can do that search too, you know, to verify what's in that book, whether it is real or not. It is not that we are to believe it, it's that we are to learn it and ask the questions ourselves as to how it sits with our common sense. They don't tell us to accept it, they tell us to live it. That's the key. Without living it, we cannot know it. Live it. They don't tell us to accept anything in those books. They tell us to read it and learn it and see what value it has according to your own heart. You are your own authority in the 21st century. We don't have to believe in anybody else but our own perception of things. Until you internally develop further and further along the line, you won't be able to verify anything. So if we don't study it, we won't learn anything. We have to study it. However, that the study is chosen is up to the student herself or himself. No one is here to tell anybody else what to do. Now, there was something I wanted to read to you. Oh, it's the Guru Parampara chain I wanted to say something about. Guru Parampara. If these souls constitute this Guru Parampara chain, that means that the masters that brought that philosophy out into the world has their own masters above them, and they above them. It goes all the way to where? To the initiator. So it constitutes a family truly. Are we separate from these beings? No, we are part of them. They are our elder brothers. So we stand to benefit from all their effort if we align ourselves with it. They cannot give it if we don't have it. That's just the rule. That's what I was looking for and I couldn't find it. It's again Mr. Judge that wrote that, and I can't find it. Yeah, what it meant was that the 19th century effort was to change the mind and buddhi of the race. Mind, manas, and buddhi is our spiritual soul. Or spiritual discernment. Spiritual discernment. Okay. They brought this into a materialistic world. They wanted to show that there is a higher aspect to the mind, that the mind works in two different ways, the intellectual and the spiritual. To this day, the student is not aware that science has accepted this philosophy yet. Without that higher mind, which looks at ideas directly and perceives its inner value, well, how are we supposed to get at this knowledge, for instance? And what else did she say? She said, writing these books retains the philosophy, but that wasn't her only motive. She wanted to be able to help us activate that principle of buddhi, the spiritual discernment. Without that, its inner meaning will not be available to us. All those books without a key are valueless. However, what did she tell us? She says, I have turned the key 3 times in Isis Unveiled and the Secret Doctrine. So the key has been turned, it has been made available for us. But Mr. Judge says that what we are talking about here is a spiritual channel. A spiritual channel. How are we going to establish it? Through the philosophy. Where did the philosophy come from? From the Master's Lodge. So, can we get to the Master's Lodge? Yes, through their philosophy only. They are not available to ordinary folks like us. But if we cultivate that in us, that spiritual channel, through this work, then we can contact them. That when they find us worthy of their attention, then we get to see the Master, the external one as well as the internal one. That's the benefit of the philosophy. We cannot start with the masters because they're gods. Are we going to do tough to them? No, they're our elder brothers. They became what they are through effort, merit and effort. Well, we can do the same thing. Perhaps we will not achieve it in one lifetime or or two lifetimes, but eventually we will. Because what do they tell us? Perseverance. Perseverance based on what? Conviction. Not somebody else telling you. This is internal conviction that the value of the truth is apparent to you. Yeah. So that the spiritual channel then we need to formulate through work. If it's not there, it cannot be given. And so we deny ourselves the benefit of the elder brothers and their help. The other statement, I think I repeated this before, is we go out and do their work because they need companions, associates everywhere. Who else is going to disseminate this philosophy in the 21st century? Students of Theosophy, at least those who are faithful to the Master's program. We go out and do the work. And then when they notice us, that what we're doing is valuable, then they come and make our work their own. That's when the influence flows outward from that center. Once that channel is established through a human heart, then it shines for all who comes in contact with it. That is why it is very important to understand it. This is not selfish. This is that every human soul has their own place in it. It is not competitive effort. It is a unified effort. When students gather around that channel that has opened, well, they can achieve a whole lot. But they have to recognize it also, that there is such a channel, and assist that human heart in accomplishing work in the universe, in our town, in our city, in our family. We can do a whole lot of work. One person can make a tremendous difference, as you know, through the historical heroes that came before us. They did a whole lot of work. And we can emulate to a smaller degree whatever we can do in that department. They're not asking for great things, they're asking for small things. Okay, if you have some other question?
Yeah. How do we go about finding more information for those out there in the world?
Well,
that's directed toward what you're talking about.
You mean how do you find information about the lodge?
Yes.
Well, we are on the tube, we're on the web, we have a meeting every week, we do outreach programs to the library. Lodges are all over the United States, they're in Europe, they're in India, so there's a network that can be approached and found online or in person. We can go to the Philadelphia Lodge in Philadelphia. There's a New York Lodge in New York. There's an LA Lodge in LA. This one in DC. There's a study class in Florida. So we are all around, and if people can come to the meetings, they're very welcome. London has an online Skype meeting. People can join that live as well. There's a study class. Phoenix used to provide one. I'm not sure what they're doing at this time, but as said, we are everywhere, and new study groups are being formulated. I think the last one was in Spain. So people are awakening to the reality that what we call life is superficial, that we need to look to its inner, deeper meaning as to why we are here, and how to change or reorient ourselves to the inner reality, our soul life, in other words. And this awakening is happening everywhere. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have a short break now and restart our
Key.
every other first and third Sundays, right?
Yeah.
Key to Theosophy roundtable.
Thank you.